I live with Muslims during Ramadan. I spend a lot of time in India, in the Ganges, and not in the Ganges, but in the Ganges. I went to where the Dalai Lama lives in India. Some of you may have been there. I lived in a Christian community in Europe. And you know, the quest, the path, looking for something was very, very strong inside of me. And I began to realize that even just following the path towards a truth gave me a certain amount of happiness. But I think there's nothing more precious than happiness. And just for interest, before I came here today, I Googled happiness. You know, Google is the all-knowing truth in the world today. How many sites do you think would come up under the word happiness?
Oh, unlimited.
100 million. Wow. And I thought, yeah, 100 million paths to happiness in our world. Because in life, I think we seek happiness, we yearn for the feeling of happiness. It's innate in the human character to try to find happiness. And when I was at school, I studied Greek history. And Aristotle once said, the whole meaning and purpose of life is to be happy. I really enjoyed that. That ultimately, it's not really an outcome to get wealthy, to get famous, to get this. It's actually to be something. It's the process more than the outcome, which is really happy. And many times my observation in life is that happiness is the most powerful of all things. Happiness can change an atmosphere. Happiness can uplift spirits. You know, when you know those people who are innately cheerful, how do you feel around them? Happiness can transform relationships, and happiness is so powerful it can influence my health. And I have a friend who was the health editor of the Times in London. He's a very interesting person. He actually meditates with the Brahma Kumaris. And he once wrote a book called Will to Be Well. And when you open that book, the first page just says just a few words. The greatest factor in good health is happiness. And I really loved it because we hear so much about diet, we hear so much about exercise, we hear so much about so many different things. But fundamentally, when we're happy, what does that do? It strengthens my immune system. We all know that when you're happy, you're more resilient to any illness. And I was once in South Africa, and I went to a school to give a talk, and for some reason, I can't remember the circumstances, there was a headmaster who I was speaking to, and someone was asking a question about the psychosomatic nature of us, you know, that our emotions influence our health. And the headmaster said straight away, I really believe that. He said, when, you know, someone is sick, you know, one of my teachers is sick or something like that, or has a bad day in the classroom, often the next day they're away from school. And so happiness is a great power in life. But I wonder, do we choose happiness? Do we choose happiness? We choose a partner in life. We choose where we live. We choose a career. But do I choose happiness? I think spirituality says I choose happiness. And spirituality says that it's choice and not circumstances that determine happiness. Many times we think happiness is luck, you know, if all the stars align, hopefully I'll be happy in my life. I feel when there's spirituality, we don't hope to be happy. We don't wait for happiness to come to me. And even perhaps more importantly, I don't look to any person or any situation to give me happiness. I'm more the master of my own destiny. And in my sort of, as I said, my final year at school, I did a little bit of Greek history, so I remember some of the things that the great scholars and philosophers said. And Socrates once said something like, wisdom is the supreme art of happiness. And I really love that, you know, the greatest wisdom in life is to be happy. And I feel more and more that is such a truth in life. To remain happy in this world, where there's so many situations and so many difficulties and so many challenges, needs a lot of wisdom. I don't know, would you agree with that? I think so. I can see a lot of nodding heads. But then the question comes, then what is sorrow? Is that the ultimate ignorance in life? And to me, you know, when I experience sorrow, it's like a little message from life that I'm on the wrong path. You know, I've got to look again at how I'm thinking and what I'm doing. So often, we develop a path in life, a behavioural pattern, you know, habitual patterns of reacting and understanding how things happen. And I'm not happy, but I just keep doing the same thing constantly. I have a friend who's often said to me, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. I think you know that I heard a few people. And often that's what we do. And then we wonder why we don't really feel very happy. But I think happiness is a tricky thing because we're presented with many different types of happiness in life, especially in the contemporary world. And I often, you know, call the most common happiness today the fizzy drink style of happiness. You know the fizzy drink style? It all bubbles up and goes flat really quickly. You know, we're into these hits, this hit of happiness. Let's go and have happiness. Let's have fun. Let's do something and go whoosh. And then what happens? You come crashing back down again. It's a very sensual style of happiness that, you know, I go and have my favourite food. It makes me feel good. I come back to the same feeling. I go on a holiday. It makes me feel good. I come back to the same feeling. You know what the most common behaviour is when we're depressed and we're a bit down? What gets us out of that depression? Shopping.
Oh. I should try that.
Shopping. Really. You know, this funny thing, an acquisition of something is a temporary high before I come back to that empty feeling once again. The problem with this sort of very superficial or this happiness is it's totally temporary. It's you know, we get the happiness and we come back. And so it becomes very addictive. Because I get the high, I want more of it, more of it. And as we know how much addiction is existing in our world because of this very temporary form of happiness. There's another one I call the mask, where we present the happy face to the world when you don't feel happy inside at all. You know that experience? And I can understand that because I think we have this innate yearning to feel happy. So I want to present a face of happiness, but sometimes my face might be smiling, but my heart feels incredibly heavy. And once in Australia, I remember a man telling me that he was a part-time comedian. And he said that, you know, he was a bit depressed as well. In fact, it's really unusual. Many comedians are manic depressives, you know. If you look at the great comedians in the world, which is a very interesting thing, isn't it? And he was telling me once he was completely and utterly and totally depressed, and he had to go and do a show. And he went and did the show, and he had everyone rolling around in the aisles, and he walked out, and he was still completely and utterly and totally depressed. And he said, really, you know, he felt very uncomfortable, almost deceptive. So sometimes it's like we wear this mask to appear happy. That's the superficial type of happiness. But there's also a very conditional form of happiness, which I call the because syndrome. And you know the because syndrome? I can't be happy because you did this. I can't be happy because you said this. I can't be happy because the family didn't clean up the home, you know. There is always a reason to be unhappy. And I think that, you know, there's so many different types of happiness that we're presented with which are really not very fulfilling, if I can say. Excuse me. Even I would say there's a relative form of happiness. And I had a friend in Australia who was worked for a network as an online news reporter. And once he was telling me he became quite disturbed by his job because he was given a brief from the news editor that when you go out, you know, he said it's good television. And he began to think, excuse me, why do I do this job? And when he researched, when he looked into it, it came out that when people see others worse off than themselves, they don't feel so bad about their own lives. It does sound a little bit cynical, but it's like, I think, there's many different types of happiness in life. There's temporary, there's superficial, there's conditional, there's relative. But I think we're looking for a more substantial meaning and a way of a more permanent type of happiness. And I think that's why many of us really do take up a spiritual journey. And I think we need to ask myself a few questions. And the first question is, where do I seek happiness from? Where do I seek happiness from? Most of us seek it out there, you know. We're brought up, and I think that one of the underlying myths of our culture is that happiness is out there. And I often say this because, you know, we teach meditation. The most common complaint when people meditate is I sit down and my mind goes boom, straight out. In 0.1 of a second, I start to go to the children, go to work, you know, the mind just is constantly extrovert. Why? Because the deep myth in our culture is that's where you'll find peace, love, and happiness. And I call it the outside-in culture. We look outside for everything that I need inside. And so what's important in that culture is, you know, what sort of clothes I wear, you know, how I look, which suburb I live in, what sort of car I drive, you know, what's on my business card, you know, all that stuff. Which we all say, oh, you know, that stuff's pretty superficial, but I think we're all a bit caught up in that game, you know, when we're honest. And what is the result of that? A lack of meaning in life, a lack of purpose in life, an emptiness, and sometimes I would say like a deep sadness within. You know, that empty feeling, that uncomfortable vacuum where no happiness sits inside. And how do we fill the emptiness? I feel the modern antidote to fill the emptiness is busyness. You know? Just keep busy, just keep running, and hope that I don't stop and my mind goes into that dark place again. I honestly believe that busyness is a form of denial or avoidance to really look deep. Because most of us find that if we sit quietly and calmly, where does your mind take you? Unfortunately, it can start to take you into dark places that are unpleasant, uncomfortable. And so let's start running. Let's just keep running and hope I don't go into this dark place where this discomfort begins to emerge. And I was once in the Brahma Kumaris, have a beautiful place in England, in Oxford. And it's right on the Thames River. And I was once there, and there was a lot of business leaders who came. And the head of the Brahma Kumaris, I know some of you have met her, Daddy Janki. Who's met Daddy Janki? No, I think she's 100 in her next birthday. And she's about how tall?
154.
She's tiny. She's absolutely tiny. And anyway, she was talking about these things, and there was a lot of, as I said, business leaders, and there was one man from the House of Lords there, and he said to her, you know, Daddy, it's so lovely what you say, but don't have time, too busy. And she's got a real sparkle in her eye, and she looked at him and said, busyness is for lazy people. I thought that was quite insightful. Because I think we're lazy on the inner journey, you know. We're very good at running around, but to really explore myself. So that first question, if I'm on this path to, you know, health, wealth and happiness, where do I look for it? As is my mind seeking it out there? Because out there, everything changes. So there's not a constant source of happiness, and I have no control over it. The second question is, who gives me sorrow? Who gives me sorrow? Most of us, you know, if someone says something that hurts me, you know, it upsets me. But what really hurt me? Was it what they said or my reaction to what they said? I think most of us know it's my reaction. So in a sense, I think one of the spiritual laws is that I am responsible for how I feel. And I fundamentally believe that if we really are genuinely wanting to have more happiness in life, I have to take that on board. I have a friend who tells me, he's often said that you can't hurt me, but I can use you to hurt myself. And unfortunately, we seem to do that a lot. And when I begin to realize that, you know, I create my own destiny, I am responsible for how I feel, it's like then I take much more responsibility for my inner world and my inner experience and stop the game of projection and blame. Because it's such a culture, isn't it? You know, my feeling often is that blame is the ultimate ignorance spiritually. And I find myself, if my mind is playing that game of finding a victim for my unhappiness, and you know how the mind can do that very easily. There's it's easy to find a victim. I heard someone in Australia recently said that 90% of politics is finding someone to blame. That was quite a good quote, you know. You know, we're always looking for someone to blame. Then I've stepped out of truth and I'm deceiving myself. Because I do think that when I am moving towards this path and when I start to take more responsibility, fundamentally I'm stepping onto the spiritual journey. But for this path towards, you know, health, wealth and happiness, I've got to start to take fundamental steps. And for me, the first step is to choose a relationship with my true self. You know, I don't know whether you often wonder, as a young person, I often used to say, who am I? And I used to ask questions. I got totally different answers from everybody. But for me now, I feel that in all of us at this moment, we have three fundamental personalities. It's like they're having a power struggle inside. Two of them are the seeds of a lot of unhappiness. They deceive me. And one of them helps me start to move towards a much more happy and meaningful life. The first personality is what I call the facade that I present to life. You know how you wear an image? I think we do that in life today. Often we feel different inside, but we project an image. And I call this personality the eye of arrogance or the eye of superiority. And when this is ruling inside, it has a whole thinking, feeling, behavioural structure. it immediately compares with others. You know, that split second I compare myself. And when the eye of arrogance is ruling, I think I'm better, I know more, I am right. You know that? Can't you see the way I see things is the right way? You know, what's wrong with you? You know, like my perspective is the all-accurate perspective on life. But when it filters into my feelings, that's when I feel so easily insulted, disrespected, not valued, excluded. You know, all these are very powerful feelings. I would even say sensitive too. You know, so when the wrong eye is ruling my inner system, it's producing all these emotional responses. And all these things destroy happiness. And what do? I often project it on you. But actually, the person on the spiritual journey begins to understand my own ego is deceiving me. And when it comes into my behavior, sometimes I have a very bossy, controlling, forceful behavior. And this eye thinks, I'm fine, you're the problem. You know? I'm okay, you have to change, you know? Get your act together. So, you know, so disconnected from truth that I think everyone else has to change. And this eye is a very powerful eye, but there's a lot of fear. Because where there's ego, there's fear that people see through, that I don't look as good as I appear. There's a lot of fear. But actually, this first eye, which is an eye that breeds a lot of unhappiness, and it's a pathway to unhappiness when my ego is dominating. But actually, it's a front for the second eye, which is the vulnerable me. You know, behind that confident me is that vulnerable me, the one who is not so, or doubts the self quite easily. And this eye I call the eye of lack of self-respect, or the eye of inferiority. And this eye also has this whole thinking, feeling, behavioural structure. It thinks others are better, others know more, others are right, others don't love me, others don't respect me, others don't value me. You know, all that sort of thinking, almost paranoid style thinking. Very common. And when it's ruling, when it comes into my feelings, I feel inadequate, inferior, unworthy, I would say even depressed. And you know, in psychology, depression is like a sadness that my dreams in life to be really loved, you know, to be valued, to be respected, haven't been met. You know, I haven't been able to achieve my dreams. But spiritually, depression is like a mourning for the loss of my true identity. You know, you mourn when something's lost or died. It's like I'm living my life, but fundamentally, who am I? And when I wear the spectacles of this lack of self-respect, the eye of inferiority, it distorts everything. It distorts my interpretation of everything in life. So someone is maybe quite nice to me, but my lack of self-respect thinks they're putting me down, or they're rude, you know, and it constantly feels it's giving me the wrong messages. It's also the seed of so much unhappiness. So my own nature, the eye of superiority and the eye of inferiority are deceiving me. And this is why the third eye is the original eye. And this eye thinks that who am I? I am a soul, a spirit, the consciousness that resides in the body. The soul, this consciousness, is a wonder. It's just a point. It exists, but there's no length, breadth, or width. Like, I am the soul, and this is my body. The soul is like acting through the costume. And as I begin to delve deeper into the awareness of the soul, when it filters into my feelings, it's like coming home to a place in myself where I feel so relaxed, so calm. You know, that sweet place where you don't have to, live up to an image, you don't have to look good, you don't have to, impress, put pressure on yourself to be something, all that. I'm fundamentally in a place of self-acceptance, a really sweet place to be. And I think that, as it starts to filter into my feelings and into my behavior, it's like when I start to become more self-aware, I take full responsibility for my feeling. And I take the responsibility that it's my thoughts that create happiness. There is absolutely no doubt people will behave badly, people will be rude, but at each point I have a choice whether I accept that or whether I don't accept it. And unfortunately, we seem to like accepting it. I have this little catchphrase for myself, or I used to some years ago, that only my ego accepts sorrow. So each time I'm allowing myself to be hurt, it's a false I that is deceiving me at that time. And so I think if I want to take a step on the path to happiness, I think this self-realization, to begin to learn more about myself and who I am, is a wonderful step towards that destination. The second step, I think, is to explore true love. And I notice for myself that when I observe myself, and I think a part of spirituality, and most of you, I'm sure, are on some sort of path, I think it's a gentle observation of myself and my inner world. And I notice that when my heart feels full of love, I feel different. Have you ever noticed that? I feel so easy about myself, so relaxed about who I am, and I am definitely much more caring, considerate, and compassionate towards others. I often think the first human right is to be loved. I don't know what you agree. It's essential for a quality life. And yet, if the heart lacks love, my own experience is the mind can never rest. You know, that agitated mind, that mind that's always looking for something. It's never really satisfied. It can never just relax. It's always agitated. It can't sleep well. It's not satisfied. It feels discontent. Because the first desire, the first need in life is to be completely loved, is to experience love. If that first desire isn't fulfilled, a million other desires emerge. I honestly believe this incredibly materialistic world in which we live is the product of a lack of true love. That when that's not satisfied, all these other desires really emerge inside of us. We search for the experience of true love. And we invest my heart in relationships. You know, you think, how much have you given in your relationships in life? You've given so much. But there's a huge human dilemma, and that is that no relationship is permanent. No relationship is permanent. Whether it's just time, whether it's change, whether it's conflict, or whether it's death, the object of my love will go. This creates so much insecurity and unhappiness inside of us. What I love about spirituality is that spirituality explores the one relationship that's permanent. And that's the relationship of I as that soul, that spiritual being, that consciousness which resides in the forehead with God, with the Supreme Soul. And in fact, meditation is a union of the soul with the Supreme Soul. And this relationship, I would say, is the one relationship that's permanent. And it's not really a belief. I'm not sort of believing in a concept or a philosophical idea. It's actually union with a conscious living being, but a soul that doesn't have a physical body. And as I would say, a soul that's unlimited in the feelings of love and happiness. Meditation is like turning your mind away from all the other influences and just bringing the mind to the one-stop shop that's always open and always available and absolutely real. But naturally it takes effort because the mind is extremely fickle. Is that true? And you know, the mind is a wonder. They say that the mind, some scientists say the mind creates 30 to 50,000 unique thought patterns in a waking day of 16 hours. Please don't ask me how they counted them. I have absolutely no idea. But it doesn't matter. It's like the mind, how much activity is going. There's another scientist that says that you can speak about 125 words a minute, but you can think about 500 words a minute. You know, when you're talking to somebody, how many other things is your mind doing? So many other things you're thinking about, you're assessing. And in psychology, they say that your mind can be aware on 7 different levels at the same moment.
Oh,
9. Even more than that, thank you. It's incredible, isn't it? And you know, you're doing so many things. It's like I'm speaking to you, I'm thinking about what I'll say next. You know, I'm watching your reaction. I'm aware that the fan's on, and there's people skateboarding out the back there. I can see different people. The mind is doing so many different things. But when we begin to focus the mind in the direction of the Supreme, it's like we're able to cool down. That connection gives the experience of love, and it cools me down inside. And I think that I often feel it's like the Supreme Soul is on the FM wavelength, the FM dial. When I'm under the influence of the eye of arrogance, the eye of lack of self-respect, it's like I'm on the AM dial. I can believe in a concept of a higher power, but I can't really connect. When I go onto that soul level, it's a real living connection with a real soul. And I think my own experience is that it's a super sensuous style of happiness. You know, we've all been brought up in a very sensual world, that happiness is food, happiness is this, you know, seeing movies, going on holidays, and it is happiness, but it's all temporary. And I think the human spirit yearns for something much more powerful. And that's why often we search spiritually. And I feel that when we experience myself as that spiritual being and the connection with the Supreme Soul, it's like as the world moves around me, as all the personalities, all the opinions, all the ups, all the downs, all the challenges, I can be very stable in that self-respect of who I am and this relationship. And it's like I have a more permanent source of happiness internally. There is absolutely no doubt it takes practice. It does take practice. But I think it's worth the practice. I don't know about you. Because I felt if I observe my life, the more I've practiced, the more I feel stable in an inner happiness. And I don't feel a slave to the external world. I don't feel the external world is dictating to me how I feel. Because often, when you're looking to that world to be happy, you feel that world, you know, is dictating to me, you know, how I should feel inside. I feel that one of the third things too in this journey towards happiness is to choose my responses and attitudes to other people. Life is relationship. And, you know, I've often asked people, what's given you the most happiness in life? Most people say relationships. Next question, what's given you the most sorrow in life? It's true, isn't it? Yeah. But still we seek happiness from others. It's a very natural thing. I often feel there's three sources of love in life. There's love from family, friends, community. There's love from myself and love from God. Not much love coming from me, mostly, you know, and sometimes we get a good beating from ourselves, you know. From God, I think many of us have a faith in God, but I don't know how much we really experience a deep love from God. So my one source of love is my family and my friends. If there's upheaval, if there's a loss, we know it's just like my whole life goes into complete chaos. Spirituality is about reinforcing and strengthening the first two relationships in life. It's about having a loving relationship with myself as a soul and a loving relationship with God as the Supreme Soul. And that's the platform to begin to have healthy relationships with others. And the reality of life is that some people are really sweet and some people are not so sweet. I was trying to think of the right words there. Some people are easy, some people are difficult. Some people are cooperative. Some people are easy and difficult. We know that what it's like dealing with all this variety of personalities in life. But my observation is that the happiest people are the givers, you know. The law of life is the law of action and reaction. And really, someone once said to me, if you want love, then give it. If you want respect, then give it. If you want cooperation, then give it. And it's absolutely true. I am thinking we have retreat centres in Australia. We have 3 of them, the Brahma Kumaris. There's one lady who runs one of them. She's a grandmother. She has 5 children and 12 grandchildren. And she is such a giver. She just, to everybody, she gives them love and respect, and it does not matter. And everyone loves her. And her heart is always overflowing with love. But she initiates it because she gives love and respect to everybody. And the law of life, 95% of it will hand back. She's always happy because I think her attitude is one of really giving. And I think that, you know, to really set on the path of happiness, I feel in this world, it's an incredibly unpredictable world. Very unpredictable. So hoping life will conspire and make me happy just doesn't work. And what I've observed in spirituality is I've been involved for many years, as you heard earlier, that in the 1970s, you know, around there, people would take it up as a hobby, you know, like just meditate occasionally when you have time, you know. But what's really important is what's out there. In the 80s, when the stress thing hit, you know, people took up meditation as a discipline, like exercise, and that's an excellent thing. But what I'm seeing now, what really works to sustain a happier life, to sustain a much more peaceful life, I think it has to be like a lifestyle, where I put a little structure into my day, every single day, to sustain myself, to navigate all the challenges at work. Because often, you know, we come to things like this and we read books and we do all that stuff. Sometimes I call that the information path, you know. We know all the information, we've got all the answers intellectually, but still life affects me deeply and I still feel very unhappy. To me, when I step onto the spiritual path, that really is when I sit in silence with my own thoughts and observe really what is happening inside and start to create a quality of thought that takes me into the experiences that I want. It's absolutely possible, but it takes practice like anything. And that's where I think that I often feel that if I really want to move on the path to a happier life, try it for 3 months. Try a practice for 3 months. You know, meditation in the morning. Not only meditation. To me, meditation is an attitude to life. It's not a practice you do for a few minutes and then your mind just goes back into the old story. It's like a commitment to myself that I'm going to live as a peaceful soul. I'm going to stop the game of give and take of sorrow with other people. I'm going to put some fundamental truths into my life. I'm going to practice them. And there's no doubt, sometimes they don't work. But the more you practice, the stronger you feel. And you start to feel that rather being a victim of circumstances in life, I can have more control over the experience of well-being in my life. Spirituality is taking back that self-mastery so that I use my thoughts and feelings to create the sort of inner world that I really appreciate. And that's where, you know, for me, I think in the last 40 years or so, I don't think I've hardly missed a day in meditation. And I wouldn't be honest if I said it's just been like that. It hasn't. It's a bit of a journey. But I think this love for self-learning, this love to learn about who I am, to learn my own habits that make me unhappy, and the habits, instill the habits and the attitudes that are going to make me a much happier person. And I think that it's not really difficult. The thing is just to do it. And I feel that if we start to put a little daily plan into my life, definitely I can move much further on the path to happiness. So I'm going to wind up there. And if anyone would like to, I'm not sure what we're going to do now actually.
Questions?
If anyone...
Any questions?
I'm looking to leader to find out. Leader is the leader here. So.
Hello?
We will.
It's on. Okay. Anybody have any questions they would like to ask Jeremy?
Did you ever study transcendental meditation?
I haven't actually done TM, but I have done a mantra meditation. Yes, yeah. I'm a great believer that all meditations are extremely good. They all have their own value. I have found myself that a mantra meditation takes you up when you meditate, but when you finish, you tend to come back. That was my own experience to the feeling I had before. But to me, what I've learned in the meditation with the Brahma Kumaris, and once I was in San Francisco, actually many years ago, there was a scientist studying the effects of meditation. If you Google it, you know, as I said, the all-knowing Google, it says that, you know, and when you meditate, meditators have less hospital visits than others. There's a lot of mental, emotional, and physical benefits from regular meditation. In Europe, in a few countries, if you can prove you meditate regularly, you get lower life insurance premiums. And you know the insurance companies there. But what this scientist was